welcome to the Villa podcast. Audio only this week, going back to our roots. I'm with my co-host Dan Wiseman. How you doing, Dan?
Feeling nostalgic, mate. It's a bit of a throwback, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is. It's we don't forget our roots here at the Villa podcast.
Absolutely
We like to mix it up a bit every so often and try and fit a pod in as and when we can. Find it kind of difficult though this week, didn't we, Dan? Because we didn't really want to have to talk about that performance from the other day.
No, absolutely not. I mean, we didn't end up doing a pod after the Liverpool game, which I was kind of providing. Hope would provide a bit of momentum and hopefully just put a bit of a feel-good factor back around Villa Park, and hopefully we could kind of harness that at the weekend. But we certainly didn't, did we?
Not at all, mate. Now, where should we start with this one? Because Villa Twitter right now is not really a good place to be, is it?
No.
As I was driving back from the game, my dad was reading a tweet from, I believe it was AVFC, the religion that you quoted, where they said how amazing our fans were, purely based on the fact there was 41,000 in the house. But fans in Villa Park certainly wouldn't have been happy with the performance that they got. It was shocking on so many levels, and in such an important game as well, Dan.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, mate. And I just wanted to touch on it there, and I think that I'm not, I was not going to blame the fans, and I don't think the fans are the sole root of the problem. I don't particularly think that they help the cause at the moment. But no, the performance was terrible, mate. And I think Dean himself said that the players are right to boo. The fans are right to boo the players at the end of the game after a performance like that. And you can kind of go into that one. It's not something I agree with personally, but it's nice to see that there's a sense of ownership being taken because the way that the players performed. And I think above all else, Rolf Hasenhüttl is a very good tactical manager. You can argue that, tactically he could have outfought Dean, and that's very plausible given his experience. But I think the Villa players can't be forgiven for what just seemed to be a simple lack of desire and fight. It seems to me that there's a real problem in the squad. As soon as we concede one goal, the heads go down, and you sense that there's a real problem with belief in the Villa side, and I think that is where the fans can come in and play a part where they don't particularly help. But you just felt as soon as Danny Ings scored that first goal that we were fighting an uphill battle.
Definitely, and talking about sort of players not really, but just showing up really or seeming to want desire. A man who I have certainly singled out on the podcast quite a few times, Matt Targett. Now, what was he doing for this first goal, mate? Because we'll talk it through for people if you haven't seen it. Obviously, a ball was played over the top for Shane Long, which Bjorn he's turning like a lorry. There was no way he was making that. And Shane Long manages to get a shot off Heaton. Absolutely fantastic save. And Matt Targett stops running on the follow-up. He just stops. And then he tries to make it look like he's done something by sliding to the ground when Danny Ings has already hit the onion bag. I'm sorry, but Matt Targett's performance was absolutely inexcusable.
No, it was, mate, and it's such a bizarre one because if you watch it back, Ings is literally, I think, as it's Shane Long that's doing Bjorn for pace, and as Long latches onto the ball, I think he's about 35 yards out. At which point I'd say Ings is 4-5 feet above, in front of Target, clearly in his eyesight, and as Courtney goes down to close down the shot as Shane Long goes to shoot. It's a good save from Tom Heaton, actually, and it's very unfortunate that it was tapped in because it's a great save, and you can't question his goalkeeping because he's got no choice about where that the rebound goes. But Target just watches Ings drift into the space in front of him, and as you said, he's a player which I've really started to question in recent weeks because I think there's just a fundamental lack of defensive ability in Matt Target, to be honest with you, mate. And I think it says a lot. Do we seriously consider calling up Neil Taylor into the next game?
We all know how every Villa fan feels about Neil Taylor, but even I've considered it. And do you know what? Up until the Liverpool game, I thought, do you know what? Yeah, but Neil Taylor looked like he was so out of breath playing against these kids, mate.
Yeah, no, I think Ty's back in training. He put a tweet up today and I think he might be even be back out on grass.
Yeah, I think Smith said he's hoping to have him back for Boxing Day.
Which would be brilliant. And there's a real kind of problem there, mate, because you potentially put Courtney at left back. It's something that we obviously saw in the Championship and in previous seasons. We know he can play there. How well he could play there in the Premier League remains to be seen. But it's a real problem along that left side of defence. But I think we've now conceded. But it reflects a wider problem, to be honest with you, mate. I think we've now conceded the most goals from corners and from set pieces of any team in the league. Disappointing to concede yet another one again at the weekend. John Terry, mate, I think needs to take a lot of responsibility. Again, another person that we've questioned previously on the podcast. It seemed as though he was finally starting to have that impact at some point this season, especially at the start of the season. We could see clearly the impact that JT was having. But that's faded, and you can excuse giving up goals in open play, but when you've got a defender of John Terry's ilk, surely set pieces are bread and butter.
You think so? Especially, I mean, Dean Smith was a centre half as well, which I just find it completely baffling. On the set piece goal, though, I found it very odd for Dean to kind. I feel like he almost scapegoated Anwar. Anwar 100% has to do better, and perhaps he shouldn't have been marking the centre half. But for him to throw him under the bus like that, I was like, I mean, your player has to head that away, regardless of what position they play, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm being too harsh here. I think he really threw Anwar under the bus. Saying that, though, Anwar should have done better. But saying that he shouldn't have been there is a bit uncalled for, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Dean's thrown Anwar under the bus in a lot of ways. As you said, he should be the player in that situation. But as you said, the pressure that he puts on Dale Stephens is minimal. What I don't understand is that Wesley's doesn't have a man. Wesley was on the front post, kind of floating around the 6-yard box, didn't pick anyone up. It's Douglas Luiz that's picking up Danny Ings in front of him. And I don't understand why Anwar's not on the edge of the 6-yard box looking to head away that low hit corner. And you have Wesley marking the centre back. Seems to be, but this was an issue throughout the game. There was a free kick, I think, in the second half that we didn't end up conceding from. I think the eventual header was put over the bar by one of Southampton's centre backs. I can't remember who, and I think Matt Targett was marking him at that time. And this is just really bizarre because these are the fundamentals of defending and decision making when making set pieces, and the very basics of height matches and finding players that are suitable marking. It's so simple, but it's yes another area of the defence, mate, which we just seem to be making so many simple errors at the moment, both on the training field and on the pitch on a match day, that just seem to be costing us at the moment.
I know, and ironically, a time where I thought we'd concede and we didn't was that 3-on-2. I mean, I feel like there's maybe a shout for a foul on Grealish. But then Luiz goes and throws himself on the floor theatrically and ends up giving the ball away. There was, honestly, it was just pure horror watching that live, seeing neither Courtney or Bjorn close down, and then they both go at the same time. You're thinking, oh my god! And I tell you, I do rate Pierre Højbjerg quite a bit, but I was so glad he ended up bottling that.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, I think a scoreline of 3-1 really did flatter us. On another day, it could have been about 7 or 8, and I probably felt the same when we played Leicester as well. Only positive of the game, realistically, is Jack's goal, and I can't lie to you, mate. I was standing, I didn't celebrate it.
It had a very weird feel to it. By the way, I mean, thank God we have that kid. It was one of his poorer games, I thought, to be honest with you. I think his time on the left wing has probably come to an end.
I hope so.
I think he needs to come back into the middle, where we can just have a ball player. To be honest with you, mate, Jack's goal on a day like he had to pull out something like that says a lot about Jack and says a lot about his quality. And it's so eventually, I think that's 7 goals and 5 assists now in the league, more than any other English midfielder. He's just on another level, and I was so glad that he managed to take a positive out from that and managed to put a smile on some fans' faces. But no, I can understand with you, mate, because it was just so deflating seeing those goals gone in, especially with the manner that we went and conceded the third.
Yeah,
Marvelous Nakamba needs to be seriously looked at after that goal because it's just an awful mistake. You watch it back and it seems to get more and more painful each time, and it's so frustrating because as you get in there with the architects of our own downfall, and we kind of come away from these games, and I can think of so many where you go, if we just didn't make that mistake there, then none of the, you think of Mings failing to clear the ball against Man United and other similar instances of just simple mistakes that are costing us week in, week out. It's not all doom and gloom, mate. I don't buy into the whole, that everyone seems to be resigned to the fact we're going down. It's December. Let's calm down. I know things aren't looking great at the moment, but I think if we beat Norwich on Boxing Day and Chelsea beat Southampton, which are two very viable results, then we're back in the green, out the relegation zone, and we can kind of kick on them from there. So I don't buy into the doom and gloom and that we're resigned to relegation because we've shown that we can be a really top side this season. But yeah, we need Tyrone back from injury. I was kind of calling him for to be dropped a couple of weeks ago, to be honest with you, mate. But my God, we miss him.
yeah. I think it's one of them things you only realise what you've got when you lose it. And to be honest, I think Courtney will be very frustrated because I feel like he will be the one to come out of the side, and obviously the scorelines don't exactly flatter his performances at all. But I feel like House has been very solid, reliable, and things we've kind of touched on, which are maybe Ty's weaknesses, where he's sort of too lackadaisical. Courtney's the complete opposite. Ball comes in, he hoofs it out, wins most of his headers, and there's times where his experience or lack of experience, sorry, will be his downfall. But it's the same with Konsa, and to be honest, I think Bjorn as well. I mean, I don't really know how I feel about Bjorn because I think he needs Ty next to him. He's a defender who needs a bit of pace next to him because as he demonstrated, he can't win a foot race with anyone. He's a fantastic defender. I don't want this to come across as me slandering him at all because Bjorn, he makes so many crucial blocks and headers. He's just not got the pace, and as good as I feel Courtney's been, he isn't exactly Tyrone, is he?
No, absolutely not. And I think just there is an aura around Tyrone that kind of provides a lot of comfort above all else, to be honest with you, because he's kind of that sweeper figure. He's got the legs and he's such a good recovery defender, which has proved quite useful for him in recent weeks, to be honest with you. But he has that ability to use his pace and his technical ability to get us out of some pretty dire scenarios that Courtney perhaps hasn't got the technical ability and Bjorn perhaps hasn't got the pace to deal with. So I'm really looking forward, and I hope we do have him back on Thursday. But yeah, just some real defensive worries. I saw that we've conceded as many goals in our last two home league games as we had in our first 7 at Villa Park this season. Which is so bizarre because I remember going to coming away from Spurs on that first weekend of the season thinking, right, okay, well, goals are going to be the issue this season. It's going to be the defence. I remember thinking, Tyrone, Tom Heaton and Bjorn Engels are good enough to keep us up by themselves. And this is why I don't really buy into the continual scapegoating of Wesley, mate, because
Yeah.
it's not the attack that's letting us down this season. I don't worry about goals. I mean, let's not, we're getting enough goals from everywhere in the side, and it's kind of making up for the fact that Wesley isn't scoring at the moment. I don't worry about that. It's just when you're leaking as many as we are at the back, it's so hard for the attack to, establish themselves in the game. And I think the defence has really got to stand up and be counted, mate. And there's not a lot of time between our next 2 games, and I don't know how much work's going to have gone in on the training ground, but we're so set up to play a 4-3-3 that there is no other system available, really, is there?
No, there's not. And despite sort of going to 4-4-2, I think we only really looked decent because of the substitutions. And and maybe the fact we matched them, and I don't think they expected that. I thought Jonathan Codger came on and played very well, and I also thought Trezeguet made an impact on the game. But again, we're playing. I mean, he took off Anwar, and I've said there's a lot of sort of whispers sort of on Twitter of people criticising Anwar, which I don't really get. I feel like he's not getting the service, and again, he's the next scapegoat essentially for me. But taking Anwar off, Jack was again on the left. He seemed to stay there. Obviously, there was no other sort of width in the side, bringing Anwar off, whatever. But him and Louise, they ran the game a bit. That last sort of 20 minutes, we actually started playing football, and you sat there thinking, Jesus Christ, why couldn't we do this 70 minutes ago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is very frustrating, and this is the problem. I was I was speaking to a friend yesterday, and they were kind of saying that do you think you're going down? Like, how do you feel about it? And they were saying how January is important, and despite the defence being the weakest area of the team at the moment, it's an area which we've seen work, and I know that we've got the personnel to create a solid defence and one that can work and one that is capable of keeping us in the Premier League because we've seen it, in so many games this season. And it's just a matter of reaching those same standards. It's not an area in which we particularly need to sign players. There's a couple of luxury positions. Ideally we'd like a new set of fullbacks to kind of come in for Elmo and Neil. But these are luxury signings that we're not going to make at this point in the season. It's not the defence we need to strengthen, but I think one thing that obviously has come out of the game is John McGinn's injury, and that's another problem altogether. But I think the game, if we're going to look at it positively, has perhaps woken up the board a little bit, because I was seeing a few whispers before the game that we weren't planning on doing all too much business. But obviously since McGinn's injury and that result itself, I think it's hit home then that we perhaps need to do a little bit more in January than we were perhaps hoping we'd do.
What do you think needs addressing in January? Because I think losing McGinn will be catastrophic, but hopefully that will mean Jack is a much more central player. Now, do you go out and do you sign a central midfielder? Because there's been whisperings that we want to do that, or does your focus remain on a forward and a winger? Or you look at someone like a Bowen, maybe see if you can get them with his contract running out. I think you could possibly. I mean, there's whispers of the Baggies bidding 15 million. I don't think he'll go for that much with 6 months left on his contract. If he can sit it out and potentially move somewhere else. But what would you address in January?
Well, I don't think it's any secret that we need a different option as striker. Because I unfortunately I don't think the Villa fans will rest without it, to be honest with you. And I do think that we just need a different option coming off the bench, and I think you get two. How many loan signings do you get in the Premier League? 2 or 3? It's not many, is it?
3, I think.
So I think that there's potentially a loan deal in there that I'd like to see, and we have to move Jack into a more central position because the midfield of Connor, Douglas, and Marvelous doesn't work and won't work in the Premier League. There's not enough weight in that midfield. There's not enough defensive solidarity. Like, these aren't players that have played together enough and that we can trust to play in a midfield with 3. So Jack's going to have to come back into that position, which suggests that ideally I'd like a kind of a winger who can also swap into a kind of 10 role, just to provide a bit of comfort and respite for Jack. And yeah, I think we do need another option up front, and maybe a left back, mate. Unfortunately, if an option comes in whereby we can get Neil out the door and then get someone else in, I think we need to look at that. But the problem is the transfer fee that we paid for Target, and unfortunately, I know that football shouldn't be played like this, but it's an unfortunate reality whereby his transfer fee perhaps means that we'll stick with him as first choice left back when perhaps he warrants a bit of competition, to say the least.
Astronomical fee, mate, isn't it, when you look at his performances?
Absolutely. I've seen people give it, and I saw you talk about it yourself, that I've seen people give him Gilbert pelters.
Yeah.
And I know he didn't have a very good game, but he's been by far and away the better performing fullback this season. but he's also very inconsistent. I'm finding, 1 week I can watch Gilbert and he'll be absolutely revolutionary down that right hand side, and he's the kind of fullback that we've been crying out for years. And you watch him playing another game, and he seems like a completely different player. So there seems to be a bit of a consistency issue right now for Fred, but he's far from the biggest problem in this side. Boxing Day is a huge game, and if as I said, the Villa fans have short memories, and I do believe if we go out and we beat Norwich and we get ourselves out of the relegation zone, that it'll be all sunshine and roundabouts over again. But if we lose, then we risk falling into something really quite toxic.
Definitely, and I think there's a lot of players that are guilty of not necessarily turning up. But as you say, if we can get some points on the board on Boxing Day, and Chelsea do us a favour with Southampton, we can look at getting ourselves out there. Looking at the sort of foot of the table now, you've got West Ham in 16th, Everton in 15th. It'd be interesting to see how Everton get on. Obviously, at the moment, we're separated by 4 points. And again, even with Bournemouth at 14, they're on 19 points. A win, changes that, pulls you a bit closer. Hopefully pulls us out of the relegation zone as well. Obviously, Norwich, our only away win on the road, actually, this season, 5-1. Wesley scored in this fixture as well. How are you feeling about this, mate? Because Norwich, they came last season. I mean, they came and beat us at Villa Park. They beat us at their place. With how we are at the moment, I'm not feeling too optimistic, but this is definitely a chance to get points on the board, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Norwich are a side which are quite hard to gauge, because I watched them go to the King Power just over a week ago, and they went toe to toe with Leicester. All over the park. Their energy levels are amazing. They pressed well. They looked like a real unit. The kind of side which we saw in the Championship, to be honest with you, and they came away with a draw in that game and were really good value for it. But they too have lost to Southampton in recent weeks. Their last win, I believe, was Everton on the 23rd of November, but before that, their last win came in September. So the results are few and far between, and it's a result where, at the start of the season, when the fixtures came out, I thought was a nice fixture to have on Boxing Day, and I think so again. And I do believe we've got the ability to beat them. I don't think there are many Villa fans that will dispute that. We just need to just win, mate. But by whatever means necessary. I'm not bothered at all this season. I've said it from the start. As long as we're above that red line at the end of the season, I don't care how we've played, what's gone on, who's scored the goals, how many we've conceded. It's all irrelevant. We just need to stay in the Premier League this season. 3 points are an absolute must, especially with Watford at the weekend, a side that just got a result at Man United. So,
Yeah.
The Nigel Pearson's going to consider his revolution very much on there. It bears real weight. But for both sides, I imagine they're looking at us as a team that's in a real weak spot that they can go and exploit. So both teams are probably going to be coming to the game feeling that they could get 3 points. But we've proved that we can do it from this season. I think the players will get confidence from the performance that we put in at Carrow Road, obviously, and you hope that could inspire a better performance.
With that being said, mate, can I get a score prediction from you?
I'm remaining positive, mate. I think we are going to win by 2-1.
2-1, mate. I would absolutely snap your hand off for that. Big game, which requires all of your support. Who loves? I mean, we've not had a home game on Boxing Day for a while now. I think the last one was Burton Albion a few years ago.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to have a home fixture on Boxing Day. I believe we've got a slightly larger home allocation as well, because unsurprisingly they've not taken their full away allocation. So hopefully Villa Park will be filled to the rafters on Boxing Day, and hopefully a late Christmas present, because we didn't have a nice early one, did we?
No, not at all, mate. A lot riding on this one, but as I said, mate, I mean, this club is capable of pulling out a few surprises, and there's the tweet that's doing the round that says, this kind of a key player coming out till March, we're struggling a little bit. It all sounds a little bit familiar, doesn't it? We'd all written off promotion this time last season, so this club is capable of some incredible things. And I'm still of the opinion that we'll be in this league next season. But it's games like that Southampton game, which you can look back at the end of the season and consider really costly. So hopefully we come out of Villa Park feeling a little bit more positive about the game on Thursday afternoon.
Hopefully, mate. With that being said, I think that about wraps up the podcast. Any final words from you, Dan?
No, mate, just support the boys in the best way you can. If they go a goal down, we can't allow Villa Park to be a toxic place. So just bat them to the hilt. If we do our bit, hopefully the players will do theirs.
Hopefully, mate. Very eloquently put. Support the lads. And have a good Christmas as well, guys. Thank you guys for listening. We will be back with some more content for you guys soon. We hope you guys have a good Christmas, and hopefully Villa can get a result for us on the weekend. So if you enjoyed, hit the like button, comment your thoughts below, and also subscribe for more. Up the Villa.
Chester's essential. The fulfilling this got potential. It's a main man, a hero. He's the main leader of the gang. Chester. 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 He's the main leader of the gang now. Chester.